Hey, Kat, welcome to a new episode of the Adopted Podcast. So glad to have you today.
Great to be here. Excited for this conversation.
Yeah. So, Kat, I was looking up your profile before the podcast, and you've done many things. You've been a product leader at Meta and Ironclad, if I'm not wrong. You've been a Sequoia Capital scout for them. You have your own firm and your own VC fund too. So, yeah, and now we are in this AI revolution that's happening. So, let me pivot the question slightly and say, like, with everything that you're seeing in AI and with the background that you have, right? Sourcing AI companies, investing in them, um, and just seeing how AI is like shaping companies today. How do you think AI is transforming the way startups and companies operate today?
Yeah, I of course absolutely love this question. I spend every day thinking about this. So big companies are going to take longer to change. There's a lot of interest. Some big companies like Workday and others even have their own internal forces that are just set up, like a workforce just set up to figure out how to apply AI internally at the company, as well as product teams everywhere, of course, figuring out how to add AI into existing products. But, big companies will, by their nature, they're big, a lot of people, a lot of process, they will typically take a little bit longer. Where we see the most change is with smaller companies, especially startups. And it's drastic. It's easier than ever to prototype a product. Recently, I've been really loving Base 44, for example, which is a no code AI assisted way to develop a software application. You could just say, build me an e-commerce app that sells X and it will create the website pages. There's a Stripe integration. So many of the things that used to take months to create an MVP, now you can potentially do in hours, maybe even eventually you have at least something there in less than an hour. Still a long ways to go before it's polished and fully ready for users, but just the speed of prototyping a new product or at least communicating your vision to someone, an investor, maybe people that you want to work with together, the speed of that is amazing. Building a website, it is easier than ever before. We've had templates for years now, obviously amazing products like Webflow, which I use to build no code websites, but now you can spin up a new website again in minutes and it looks good. It's got a header, a footer, it's got a bunch of pages, like it's got a pricing page, a demo request page. And so I think there's more startups than ever before at the early stage that even look like halfway good and halfway promising. What that does is more entrepreneurship than ever before, but also it's harder to stand out than ever before. So maybe the problem has shifted from how do I even get somewhere a basic product, a basic website, to how do I make this a sustainable business? How do I make sure that customers know about me and care? Because now there's 1,000 competitors on day one. So it's very, very different. It's a brand new world when it comes to startups given AI.
Completely agree with that. I think startups are seeing scale like never before. Like they're scaling so fast with the PLG motion. But then there's also questions of how sustainable that revenue is because so many people just trying things out. But I use Lovable. I know you mentioned a different company. I use Lovable Bold for rapid prototyping. I think it's fantastic, right? How quickly you can get code and design at the same time with just a prompt.
It's amazing. And I did say, like, I think AI is changing how we prototype. How do we build sustainable products is interesting. I think Lovable, Base 44, like anyone that allows you to build a web app really, really quickly, the minute that your web app becomes more than a prototype and it becomes a real business, you don't want platform risk. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when a business making 5, 10, 20 million revenue, like, are these businesses going to feel comfortable staying on a platform as opposed to just building their own and completely owning their entire stack? I think we're going to see a lot of evolution there, but at least that early stage of just building something, just prototyping, just proving it out, like seeing how customers and users respond, that is completely night and day different now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kat, let me also ask you about investment decisions. I know you're an active investor and you've also helped Sequoia scout companies. And so much has happened in the AI space, right? When I was looking at YC, I think 80 or 90% of their batch is all AI companies right now. So what is the lens that you apply when you evaluate all these AI pitches that come to you?
Yep. You could argue every pitch these days is an AI pitch. I don't know that you can be a technology startup and not talk about how you will either already applying AI or how you will apply AI. Of course, there's a lot that's already been said about open AI wrappers. This idea of you simply take what OpenAI, take what ChatGPT can do, apply it to a use case, put like a little website and like some specific vertical specific language, and then call that a business. And I think again, a lot has already been said around these might be even fast growing small businesses, but ultimately, how sustainable is this really? If it took you 3 weeks to build it, why can't other people? I think it's really interesting. I think we will see to maybe the tech world going in the direction of two types of businesses going forward. One will be what I almost call e-commerce like businesses. So like take sneakers, for example, or t-shirts. In the last 10, 20 years, Amazon, Shopify, Stripe. I mean, if you want to start a t-shirt business, it's easier than ever. Heck, you don't even have to make the t-shirts or even see the t-shirts to sell them online and to try to get some kind of profit going. But because it's become easier than ever to build a t-shirt business, there are many businesses out there. And so I think the same thing is happening to tech, where building an application it used to be a thing. Like you had to be an engineer, and like not everyone was an engineer, and it was hard. But nowadays, it's going to get to the point where you don't even have to be an engineer to go ahead and like build a web application startup, and it's kind of going to be like t-shirts or sneakers. So it's going to be very competitive. There's going to be a lot of businesses out there. But that said, there's still giant companies like Nike. Like there's still giant e-commerce brands today that started in the last few years. So just because it is easier and it's therefore competition is harder, it doesn't mean that big businesses can't be built. So I think we will see companies that are, instead of being very, very good at engineering, companies that are very, very good at go to market.
Well,
They will scale some of these, maybe even no code created software businesses, and they will create iconic businesses. I do think, again, at least sometimes that will happen. But the other type of AI, or I don't know, tech business we will see is what we've always had, which is real, I guess, kind of like real hard R&D businesses, the kinds of businesses where you can't just build it in 3 weeks in an AI no code, way, where there really is some kind of deep tech going on that you do need a lot of time, maybe specialized skills to build. And then some of those businesses as well will get very, very big. And so I think versus before, software was just one type of business, we're really going to see, like, you almost have to start evaluating startups of like, are you a go to market startup, or are you like an R&D startup? It won't be quite as extreme as that. The best companies will actually be both, but I think we will start seeing a bit of a bifurcation there.
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I built a company in the SaaS era. It was called Slintel back then. And at that time, when we used to pitch to VCs, a lot of times people would ask, hey, what's the moat, right? And is application the moat? Is data the moat? Network effects? I think in the AI world, moats become even more important, like you said, right? And a lot of data can be accessed by LLMs. A lot of application functionality can be built really, really quick, right? So is distribution your moat? I think people have to think more long-term now and really, really figure out how to differentiate their model, right? And how do you scale and become an IQ, like you said?
Yeah, moats are such an interesting topic. There are examples of moats for sure, like you said, very rare, but sometimes businesses truly have proprietary training data, or maybe there really is some kind of technical capability that at least for a certain amount of time is concentrated in a few individuals, and again, at least for a certain number of years, they can kind of profit from that. That said, I think there's also just a lot to be said for building very, very fast. And maybe you don't have a moat on paper where you can say, well, we have this data, or we have this technology, or we have this patent that others don't have, where it's like, well, yeah, there's really no reason why others don't do what we do, but we're just doing it really well and really quickly. And so, in some sense, just excellent velocity. It's always been a moat, if you will. It's always helped a business scale up, but also kind of keep staying ahead of competitors. And I think that will continue to be the case. If anything, it's just even more important than ever now. If you are if you are starting a business, you have to move fast, and it's not enough to just build something of value where on that day you can say this is why my product or my business is better. You have to keep adding and adding and adding, and just continuing to differentiate yourself over time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Kat, now moving on to your, your company, Vareto, right? So what I understand is it's helping automate financial operations, planning, analysis, and all of that. Could you talk a little bit about that domain in general, like financial operations of finance? How is AI impacting this space today?
My space is definitely very different than I think some of the users of Base 44 or Lovable, other products like that. When it comes to finance teams, especially in bigger companies, maybe financially regulated kind of enterprise public companies, the stakes are very high. Everyone wants automation. Everyone in finance wants their reporting or any sort of routine task. They're doing monthly forecasting, or every week they have to collect some kind of inputs or approvals. Everyone wants that automated. But when it comes to financial data, the stakes are just so much higher because security, privacy, not everyone in the company can ask a chatbot like, what was revenue last quarter, or what's the forecast? They're whitelist and blacklist. There's just a lot of concern around permissions and also around data accuracy. Like, hallucinations are fine if you're writing a marketing blog. They are not at all okay if you're asking about hard, cold numbers. And very important decisions, maybe multi-billion-dollar decisions affecting layoffs, decisions affecting, people's jobs are at stake. So you cannot be wrong. And this is kind of where I think the approach to AI in the finance operations space, like where Vareto plays. Yes, there's automation. Yes, everyone's excited for chatbots and natural language, but the stakes are so much higher to even get to the point where people can truly feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't be 98% accurate in this space, right? You have to get to close to 100%. So in spaces like these, Cat, which are, I would say, a slightly higher risk for AI, right? I can think of healthcare, finance, where the impact of wrong decisions is a lot. Do you see AI mostly helping improve productivity of finance professionals, for example, versus kind of autonomously making decisions and doing things on their behalf?
Yeah, great question. I think that question applies to every industry. Where will AI augment and where will AI fully replace? Um, at least in finance, I don't see AI fully replacing, for example, the entire FP&A function. What I do see that can happen is there's an army of analysts right now. So there's FP&A, maybe managers, directors, VPs. There's folks that are really architecting. These are the drivers of the business, or these are the ways that we could potentially invest capital. There are the architects, and then there's the army of analysts that historically have executed. So folks that are told, hey, build me 3 scenarios that do this. And then you go off, and a week later, you come back with multiple spreadsheets. So one thing that I do see potentially happening is we keep the architects, and they are even more empowered with various AI tools such as Vareto. On the analyst side, at the end of the day, somebody has to grow up to be the architect, and it takes a lot of experience to have that level of control and to be the kind of that advisory sounding board to the whole executive team, to the board. So we will still have junior FP&A people. Again, like, there needs to be a career path there, but maybe the balance might shift where you actually have fewer FP&A analysts than before, because now you can, because a lot more of that routine work that otherwise might have consumed most of an analyst's time, a lot more of that is starting to become kind of outsourced to the AI tools. But again, I see it as augmenting, and maybe meaning a function can be smaller than it was before. I don't see it as a full replacement for that specific function. In other areas of enterprise, though, there will be functions that get replaced. So I think it's very specific to what function we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I work a lot with our engineering team and our product team, and we keep asking this question in general for engineering and product there too. I see that we can do things much faster, like you said, rapid prototyping, etc. So it definitely elevates human productivity, AI in general. But is it able to do things completely autonomously? I don't think we are there yet, at least like in the areas that I'm plugged in as well. Maybe we'll get there. Um, So moving on, Kat, I want to also talk a little bit about product roadmaps today that every company is struggling with, right? Uh, I think whatever was the roadmap 2 years ago is probably thrown out of the door. Everybody's come up with new roadmaps, and AI has plays a big portion in those roadmaps. So can you talk a little bit about what you are seeing with companies that you talk to in general? How's roadmap looking like?
Yeah, again, really, really interesting question that I think breaks down depending on the size and the maybe the maturity of a company. If if you're talking about a big mature company that's got thousands of customers, that's delivering a lot of value, certainly their product roadmap, they're rushing on how can we deliver some kind of AI features, if for no other reason than to stay ahead of their competitors. Because if your competitors are seen as modern and forward thinking and they have 5 AI features and you don't have any, that maybe that is going to lead to a churn problem. So I think everyone wants to, if nothing else, be able to put that stamp and say we have AI features. But then when you go a level deeper and you really look at how useful are these AI features, are customers really demanding that an existing business add AI features? Is this like their number one request? Maybe this is a bit of a hot take, and again, depends on the business, but I don't know. I think a lot of times what customers actually want isn't necessarily an AI feature, but is more like, for years now we've been asking you for this very, for this very specific functionality, or maybe it's an integration, maybe it's like they run into some kind of edge case when they're doing a common workflow, and AI is not going to fix that. It's really more of a fundamental kind of like, what does your product do? Again, maybe a bit of a hot take, but I think for large, mature companies, customers are mostly just asking for the things they've probably been asking for. But for newer companies, this is where it gets interesting, because if you simply build all the things that existing legacy companies have, and then you try to layer on AI on top of that, that's a giant roadmap, and it's very hard to go first at table stakes and then at differentiators. So I think the tactic a lot of newer companies are doing is to say, well, we are AI native, what that means, many interpretations, but we don't have all of the features of these existing companies, but at least we have this kind of one or two core capabilities that they don't have and they can't have because, the newer companies are building their technology in a new way. Like one very common example actually has to do with data and APIs. If you look historically at legacy tools that were built, especially like 20 to 30 years ago, and some of them are very much still around today, like Workday, what you'll see is they were not built in a world where it was expected that there would be self-serve integrations and like no code. I mean, Workday is almost it's almost like a set of building blocks that are highly customizable, but which only highly trained, often professional services folks can use. And then they create a very custom version of Workday for each of the customers. Contrast that with today's modern tools like Airtable and Notion and obviously Adopt, and like just modern tools that are built in a very flexible building block and a very like data centric way right from the start, integration way right from the start. It's much easier to layer AI on top of that than it is to take a legacy tool that wasn't even built in a data integrations, self-serve friendly way and try to layer AI on top of that. So that's kind of where I think modern startups just building with AI in mind. That's what I think of really as AI native. And then immediately trying to layer on at least one or two core examples of AI that are very hard for those legacy incumbents to do anytime soon. It's not going to get everyone to switch over right away. You do still have to get table stakes there, but that really helps to be competitive right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's this kind of like a gold rush happening right now in the AI native companies as you speak, right? Where everything is being questioned. The big companies are obviously trying to protect, their customer base, their pricing models. Pricing is also changing, by the way, right? From user based to
Absolutely.
transaction based. But so I see, so Kat, I actually see it in two different ways. I don't know if you also see this. So the one is there are a set of companies that are challenging the existing legacy SaaS players, right? Like a Workday, a Salesforce, coming up with new age versions of those products, completely AI native. And then there's another set of companies that are basically saying, hey, AI is not just meant to like help with tools, right? You can also help do what people are doing, augment them, and either they're vertical AI or horizontal AI, but they're kind of looking at that market. Do you see like between these two, like do you see more companies, AI native companies having more success in the tools market or the people market? Like do you, yeah, like if I'm a AI native company today, right, I'm starting up fresh, is it better going after an incumbent, large incumbent with like a Workday, etc.? Or is it better going after like, in a space where there's no existing tool, but you can do a few tasks that humans are doing and basically help them do them faster? You know, productivity and
Mhm.
replacement, where there were no tools in that category before.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky in that what really is a market where there were no tools?
Yeah.
Um, I think you can maybe point to you can point to some things that it would have been very hard for tools to do before. I mean, when it comes to what Jasper and many kind of marketing writing companies are doing now, you could argue, well, before Gen AI, we really didn't have tools that would just write out marketing blogs for you or uh, like spit out headlines and also be good at it. Honestly, like very very genuinely good at it. So we didn't have tools, but we did have services. You could hire marketing consultants and brand agencies. So we had vendors. Whether the vendors were tools or people, you could also kind of argue a company generally like you pay a cost, you get an output, and then you kind of see how good it is it relative to the cost that you put in. And now brand agencies will always do better than I think than any sort of AI tool. Again, at least for now and for most use cases, there's just always that extra level of polish and judgment and truly understanding what the customer is asking for. But that said, the difference in price is it's astronomical.
Mm.
So this is sort of where now using both, and it's not even coming back to that replacement question. It's not necessarily an either or. It's well, I'm still going to use a marketing consultant, a brand agency for the most important things, like when I'm really publishing the essay of what Vareto is, or we're doing an important marketing launch, or we're doing some PR. I will always go to the absolute best source. But then when it comes to the thousand marketing blogs, maybe I don't need that same level of thought and polish there. So I think it's going to be an and it's really more of a figuring out who and what am I going to use for what use case, and just continually also changing that because AI keeps getting better and better.
Got it. Yeah. Cool. One more question on roadmaps, maybe this time more focused on the larger companies than on startups. So we talked about companies like Workday and traditionally large SaaS companies that are adding AI features, not necessarily ones their customers are asking for, but just to like have competitive parity. But do you think like the existing large SaaS companies need to fundamentally change their model, like either their pricing or even what they're offering in their product? Do you think there's a reset happening, or do you think they're fine? Like the new players are just going to challenge them in different ways, but they continue to exist. So what's your take on?
Yeah, I think legacy incumbents always, even before AI, this was always a thing. If you look at the general tech company in particular kind of curve, in year 1 and 2, maybe 3, you're just getting started. People aren't necessarily taking you that seriously yet. Like it just takes so many features. And even if you had all the features on day one, the question customers are going to ask is like, well, the incumbent, no one gets fired for buying the incumbent. They have thousands of customers and all these case studies and reviews. Meanwhile, here you are. And even if you have all the same features, you're kind of untried and, it's risky, right? So the first few years, you're kind of in that you're trying to win customers, you're trying to prove yourself, you're building up the table stakes features. Then in years kind of like call it like 3 to 7 is like the glory years. You're like as a tech company, you have enough proof points, you start actually winning head to head against the incumbents, and you're seen as the modern, better alternative, and like sales is skyrocketing, and that's awesome. But then what starts to happen, and look, it could start happening in year 4, it could start happening in year 8, happen later, but at some point you're going to kind of reach the end of the happy hour and you're going to be seen as the incumbent. And now there's startups talking about you as the old clunky, you don't have the latest and greatest technology. And I think every business typically follows that curve. Most businesses get acquired or something happens, right? Most businesses do not become these generational iconic businesses, but in order to stick around, like look at Microsoft, they have reinvented themselves. I mean, sure, they have some incredible products that have been very sticky, but they have really reinvented themselves over and over and over in a way that some other businesses that were really large several decades ago have not. And so I would argue even before AI came around, it was already important for legacy incumbents to, yes, like you may have to re-architect your, like, it may be very painful, but you might have to re-architect your entire product or at least big pieces of it. You might have to, like Salesforce made many acquisitions to stay ahead of the curve. If you look at what they did with analytics and cloud and mobile, like, so whether you buy, whether you build, but like you have to evolve. And I think what AI does is it basically takes that same principle and it kind of skyrockets it a bit because now the startup competitors are they're at least showing products, even if the products don't fully work, but they're showing these products to customers who then start asking for those features, including of the legacy competitors, perhaps. And it just means that pressure on incumbents is even greater than before. But it's not a fundamentally new situation. It's just the speed at which incumbents are feeling that pressure is probably more than it was in the past.
A very, very valid point. Yeah. And maybe last question before we move to a quick rapid fire from our side. So when you think of the future, right, the next few years, would love to hear, like, and this is an open-ended question, would love to hear your take on what's going to happen in this space, right? It could be consolidations, M&A. We've seen some activity recently with MoveWorks, right? And ServiceNow. But consolidations are, how is this battle of agents versus apps going to span out? Large companies, small companies versus span out? Would just love to hear, like, what is your perspective on the future here?
So, I mean, I think the easy answer would be to say what will happen is what has always happened. We will have big companies, small companies, but just like I think about financial planning and forecasting, I'm going to take the same approach actually to forecasting the future here with respect to AI. There's like in forecasting, there's kind of micro trends, there's macro trends, there's seasonality, there's drivers, right? So if we look at the general macro trend, again, even AI aside, the general macro trend has been there are more startups, like every quarter, every year, there are more startups than ever before. It becomes, like we talked about, it becomes easier and easier in the tech ecosystem to start startups. There's also just more venture capital, just many, many factors. Also, like just look at the economy overall. In general, things tend to grow and just there's more opportunity. So what that means is there are more companies. Also, there are more budgets. I think this point is often missed, but we used to have companies like Workday go public at 100 million in revenue, and nowadays it takes more like closer to 500 million in revenue to go public. There's more capital to keep companies private for longer. So they're like, and just budgets as well. Whatever you thought the size of a market was for a certain software technology, that like there's more and more companies that are still continuing to adopt these technologies. And so the budgets and therefore the potential market caps and the number of, let's say, decacorns in any given space, all of those keep growing. And so I think what we're going to see is, I think people will be surprised by perhaps the number of companies, including even within a single space, that are able to get to 100 million in revenue, maybe even like 500 million in revenue. If we keep using if we keep indexing on the number of such companies and like the number of winners in a space that there was last decade, I think we're going to miss the opportunity of the next decade. So that's kind of one thing. I think there's going to be more winners and just more like significant companies than people realize, and that's a good thing. I think we are going to see just a bigger, longer tail. And one way to think about this is when you look at like Facebook and Google, small businesses and advertisers, there was a while ago, there was a time when no one advertised online because online didn't exist. And then at first there were early adopters of online. And now if you're a small business, you have an online presence. Maybe you're not spending ad dollars, but you're surely getting like Google reviews or Yelp reviews, right? So just like that long tail grew very quickly from early adopters to at this point, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of businesses around the world. I think we're going to see the same thing here, where at first we're talking about like hundreds of startups, YC, like less than 10 years ago, YC would have like 50 companies in a cohort. Now there's like hundreds, right? So I think we're going to see the long tail.
Yeah.
So the big companies are gonna, the number of them is gonna grow, but nowhere near the size of the long tail. That's gonna grow much, much faster. And again, I think what that's gonna mean in terms of just the natural trends is a lot of competition, a lot more dollars, or at least mind share having to go towards advertising, effectively like marketing and standing out. R&D is still a thing, but go to market and especially acquisition channels are going to become the big thing. And I think in terms of just forecasting, also, I guess apps versus, what's going to become big. Is it like standalone? Like, is it apps? Is it co-pilots? Like, how does that whole universe evolve? I think that's probably going to be uh, maybe the most unclean that I guess prediction. It really is going to be all of the above. And it's going to depend less on, in a way, like what is fundamentally better. Is it better to have a co-pilot that integrates with a bunch of others, as opposed to all those companies building their own thing? It's going to be, I think, less based on logic like that, like what is ultimately better, and a lot just based on whatever companies are out there that are good and that can show value quickly. Those will get adopted and they might be sticky. And so I think we're in a way, we're going to just see a lot of things shaped by, honestly, I think by branding, by go to market, by velocity, more so than ever before.
Got it. Great. Awesome. So show value quickly, get adopted, find your moat, right? And scale, because there's going to be a lot of competition, a lot of noise. So really differentiating is the most important thing here. But the long tail aspect was interesting too. So many more companies, so many more entrepreneurs, right? Kat, with that said, I have three quick questions for you. It's a quick fire round, and then we'll end it after that. Question one is, favorite AI tool that you don't use for work?
I love playing with AI tools. I think one that I'll mention that probably everyone has heard of is Midjourney, but I don't use Midjourney to create work photos or marketing pictures. I actually use Midjourney for my kids. One of my kids loves seahorses, and I have created pictures, really real life pictures of seahorses driving cars, obviously swimming, dancing at disco parties. It's really amazing. And my kids love the creativity. Like, AI is now, it's like this new thing that at bedtime just opens up a whole new world.
I think I should use that too. My daughter loves seahorses. I'll try that today. Favorite productivity hack? I know you're a founder and an investor both. So how do you stay productive?
I love my weekly ritual of prioritizing the week. So usually on Friday, sometimes on Sunday, I will actually spend 1 to 2 hours just thinking about the week, really thinking about what does the business need to do this week? Like, what are the most important things we need to do to be successful? And then based on that, am I aligning my own time with those things? And it helps me go into Monday morning's meeting. Monday morning is always when we do a team all hands, really make sure everyone knows what they're doing. It really helps me go into that. And to the extent that any sort of shifts have happened, maybe there's context that some team members don't know about, it gives me my ability to do that prioritization, come into the meeting, make sure everyone else has all the context, and really set the week up well.
Awesome. Last question, Kat. What's one piece of advice you have for aspiring entrepreneurs starting in the AI space today?
So I think, honestly, whether it's AI or anything before, the fundamental, when you're starting a business, actually focus on starting a business and not a startup or a company. I think too many people focus on kind of the excitement of, like, I want to have a brand name and a logo, or like I want to see how quickly I could scale users, or but a business is a business, and a business needs to make money, and it needs to have users, customers that are actually willing to give you money. Maybe not immediately on day one, but I think too many people get caught up in all the trappings of what they think a company or a startup should be, like whether it's swag, whether it's like hiring, whether it's maybe, I know for myself, like taking things that I've seen done at Facebook, at Ironclad, like great companies, obviously, but also there are things that maybe I always wanted to try to do a bit differently in my own company, parts of the culture, parts of the compensation philosophy, how we hire. But all of these things in the end they're a privilege that you get to do only if you actually are creating value for your users and customers. So above all else, if you're starting a business, focus on the business part of that business.
Awesome. Great advice, Kat. With that said, I think I must say thank you. Lots of wisdom in this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.